What is going
I
on, everybody? Welcome to a special from Screen to Shelf review slash showcase. Today, Will and I here have gotten this will go live the day that the Steelbook drops, but we did get our hands on it a day early. So we've been sitting on it, we've watched it, we have watched it and consumed it. So we're going to give you our thoughts. We're also going to showcase it while we talk about it at the same exact time. And then really just go from there. So, Will, you just finished yours. I finished mine earlier today. What did you think of the video resolution and the 4K quality, the HDR?
Yeah, well, it was a first time watch for me, just so everybody knows. Chase and Gabe have a discussion about this movie out on our channel, so you guys can check that out if you want an extended discussion of that, the
Yes.
plot and the movie itself. But as far as the transfer, again, I have nothing to really compare it to, seeing as I haven't seen the theatrical cut or haven't seen it theatrically, I should say. I think the transfer is gorgeous. I think the transfer is
Agreed.
gorgeous. I will say this, just to put this out there, Fury Road being, as I've said before, to you at least, one of the best, if not the best,
Agreed.
action movie of the last decade. It's hard to believe it's been so long since it came
Mm-hmm.
out back in 2015. As wonderful and as amazing as a movie that it is, at the time when the 4K transfer came out, it got some less than stellar reviews. There was kind of a mixed reaction to that transfer,
Yeah.
some of it was nitpicking, but there was something to be said for the overall quality of that transfer. I felt that, now that we got that out of the way, this, on the other hand, was amazing. The level of
Agreed.
detail here was awesome.
Yep.
Now I will say this, and this is something I talked about before the video. This isn't necessarily a critique on the movie itself. I'm not really going to get into that. But as far as my particular setup, I have an OLED, so some things are much more noticeable. Some of the CG scenes in this movie, they looked a little wonky, but again, that's not detracting from the overall quality.
Yep.
I just think on my particular setup, it was a little more noticeable, So
Yeah.
some people, depending on what kind of TV you have, depending on what your display setup is like, it might not necessarily be as apparent. So that was just one thing that kind of visually threw me off. But again, that's not necessarily anything to do with the transfer itself. That's more so, some of the cinematography and the lighting choices with those scenes being mismatched. That being said, overall, dude, like when the scenes that didn't have a lot of CG or the non-CG scenes were incredibly detailed. Like the level
Yeah.
of detail was crazy. Like one scene in particular, I'm trying to remember what part of the movie it is. I think it's towards the end of the movie where Anna Taylor-Joy's character Furiosa, there's a close-up of her body with like the arm where she's like pulling, it's a little thing on her shoulder that she pulls down to kind of power up the arm. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is. It's some kind of hydraulic mechanism, so to speak, for lack of a better description. You can see the beads of sweat on her shoulder and on her chest. Incredible level of detail.
Yep. Looked
Even
insane.
it was great, man. I'm trying to think of other scenes that kind of stood out to me. Some of the effects, like in the beginning, when the guy that captures her when she's a young girl, when she's a child, to bring her back to
Yeah.
Dementus's base or whatever in the beginning there, that whole camp that they have set up in the middle of the wasteland. The dude that kind of gets his neck cut up when
Yeah.
she does that thing with the bike and drives off and it kind of pulls him off. That was very detailed. You can see
Yeah.
all the practical effects. The gentleman that played, I forget his name in the movie. Maybe you can help me out here. The guy that had the missing eye, I thought that looked
Oh,
really good.
yeah. His practical effects. That's the same guy that plays Morton Joe. He plays two roles in this movie.
Yeah, I forget the actor's name. He plays 2
Yeah.
roles. Yeah, and he
Yeah.
did great as Immortan Joe, but that's the
Great
thing, man.
voice. Yeah.
Everybody, the detail was incredible. We'll get into the audio too, because I do want to talk about that. I'm interested to
Yeah.
hear what you have to say about the audio, because I have a comment on that. But yeah, man, video is great. Again, comparing this to the Fury Road 4K, uh, it looked amazing. It looked
Yeah.
amazing. The scenes in the desert were even though it's a wasteland, everything was incredibly detailed. The colors really pop, especially on an
Mhm.
OLED TV. The scenes in the green place were amazing. Those
They were.
greens of the leaves and the trees, they look incredibly lush, very
Yeah.
lush.
Very
I love
vibrant.
that. There were actually points where I paused it just to kind of
Just to
take
look
it
at it.
in because it just looked great, man. So
Yeah.
kudos to the. I mean, again, that's also credit to the cinematographer. Um, but yeah, I think it looked great.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and to top off a couple more scenes on there that really help showcase the contrast, like Will had said, there's like a lot of the beauty in the wasteland. Just because the desert's dead and there's not a lot going on doesn't mean there's not
Mm,
beauty to be had there.
yeah.
Same thing whenever Dementis, it's not a spoiler because it's in the trailer, but the part where the red flare goes off,
Oh yeah,
immaculate. That's
yeah.
probably
That
one
looked
of the
really good.
best shot and best looking parts on a 4K like modern disc I've seen in a while. That
Mm,
looked insane. Also, the part for the people that are listening on the video, the exact part where he's in the situation he's in that we have on our background that we're using right now, and he looks up and sees a silhouette over the
mm,
sand dunes over there. Just the amount, like whenever the gust of winds come through, the sand particles that you can see just kind of dissipate and run through the screen. It's insane the level of detail they got on this.
yeah,
On the video side, I think this is honestly one of the best of the year. I think this is an absolute, like, this is going to be a disc that people demo for a modern movie for a while, I believe.
I
Even with
agree.
like what you said with like the CGI, but I think that's part of like when you get something that looks this good, that stuff
Mm,
that's finished at 2K. Meanwhile, you have the other things because I believe this is a native 4K scan. The more practical parts are going to really pop out in contrast. And like you said,
yeah.
well, I also use an OLED, so they were a little bit jarring. Like whenever you had the pup, the war pup, the smaller guy, whenever he was on the
Oh
rig.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. What do they call him? A war pup? Yeah, that's his
yeah,
name. Yeah.
yeah. So whenever he pops up, the background looks really weird.
Yeah,
So
and there's a
yeah.
multitude of scenes that kinda have that look to them, but,
Hmm.
again, and that's something I'm willing to overlook because, as you
Yeah.
said, if it's rendered in 2K, but even if it's upscaled, the majority of stuff is in 4K, that stuff ends up getting upscaled in some cases, and
Hmm.
usually with CG, because it's rendered in 2K, it tends to look a little off, so to speak, for
Yeah.
lack of a better word, so
Yeah.
it's expected, but
Exactly. And
yeah,
in
the other
regards
thing
to
I was
the
gonna say, little
oh, go
bear
for
that
it.
he has, the
Oh
little,
yeah.
that like, even the scene when it, like, she drops it on the ground, like, just the detail, on that, and it's so cool to see that, because it's like, it's like, okay, that's an actual prop that they used, and just to see the level of detail, like, just the way the bear is, like, sewn together with the little, even when he's wearing it as costume. That's the other thing that this kinda transfer really makes stand out is you were talking about the world in the desert, and even though you might think there's not much to be seen there, it's almost like the decayed beauty of the world that they're inhabiting is
Yeah.
kind of brought to life by something that's as detailed as this transfer is. And that's the other
Yeah.
thing too with the costumes. You really get to see how intricate a lot of these costumes are. You see how they're made
Hmm.
up, and that's something that, like, you could go ahead and pause it at any given moment where there's a close up of a character's attire, and that's all very well detailed. So I love
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And I think I'm getting nerding out just a little bit here, but no,
Yeah.
it's just credit to the transfer. It's one of the best that I've seen this year anyway. So
No, I agree. And I really do think the audio needs some kudos as well, because
mm,
you had shouted that out a minute ago or so you wanted to talk about that. And then after this,
yeah,
we'll dive into special features. But the audio sounded insane. I did
mm,
go and see this because I know you had said that you didn't have a reference point. It's kind
right,
of hard to rival. I went and saw it in Dolby Cinema. So getting that like true 7.1 Atmos is a lot different when you're in that setting. But
oh yeah,
for the AVR setup and the rears and fronts that I have and the overheads I'm using, it sounded so good, man. Like, it
no,
sounded so good. I don't know if this rivals Civil War as one of the best that I've seen this year or heard this year,
hmm,
but it's really good, and it's a different type of movie because Civil War is a much more pinpointed sound effect style. This one's
right.
much more broader, more uproaring, and more, like, uprooting you out of your seats very abruptly through engine roars, subtle sounds, things whipping through the air. I think it sounded incredible whenever the score would come up and the score was prevalent. It really layered itself nice. It didn't have too much going on. I think it's one of the best sounding audio tracks of the year.
I agree. The Dolby Atmos sounded incredible. I mean, I just got a new speaker set up about a month ago, so I'm
Hell
just
yeah.
happy to test it out. This movie being one of the first movies with Dolby Atmos that I've watched on it, and dude, honestly, like, yeah, it's incredible. Now, I told you personally before we recorded this, I was kind
Mhm.
of underwhelmed by the lack of overall score in the movie. And again, that's
Yeah.
not a critique on the Atmos mix itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody, just to clarify, that's just compared to Fury Road. Fury Road, excuse me, had a much more driving soundtrack. I felt that was more present throughout the movie. Although I didn't really get that at times with this movie, I think the mix was still top notch.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
and that's what I love about this kind of mix, especially with a movie like this. It really just kind of entrenches you in the world that these characters are living in, and that's what you want with a Dolby Atmos soundtrack, or a mix for that matter. You want
Yeah.
the audio track to absorb you into the movie. You want to feel like you're kind of living in that world and experiencing it as these characters are. So, yeah, um, I don't know. I'm excited to talk about Godzilla minus one when that comes out. I'm excited to watch
God.
that and see how well that sounds. But as of
Yeah.
now, I got to watch Civil War 2. I'm a little behind and not as up to speed as you and Gabe are on some of these newer releases. But by the end of the year, we'll have to do a best of list. But I would
Yeah.
probably put this on there right now, visually and audibly. I think it's probably one of the best discs of the year so far. So
I agree.
it's on my list right now. We'll see where it ranks, come the end of the year. But we get a few more big releases that are coming out that are supposedly stacked when it comes to the audio mix. Godzilla being one of them. Everyone's going to be talking about that. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
I'm with you. I think it sounded great on my setup. So you want to dive
Yeah.
into the special features? Talk about that. You took a little bit more of a dive than I did. I got about half hour through the first one, which I think you said is about an hour long, right? The
Yeah,
making
I
of.
think it's just around 58 minutes. And anybody that like I know there's a lot of hardcore fans, like I've told this before, Fury Road is my favorite movie of all time. So this is a world I can't get enough of.
Hmm.
The documentary could have, or the making of featurette, and this could have been 3 hours long, and I still wouldn't be happy. But there's a really good one on here that runs about an hour long. It's 57 minutes or so, but it's called Highway to Valhalla in Pursuit of Furiosa. That tells you everything. That lets you understand, like we had talked about some of the CG and stuff like that. That even goes into detail why this has more prevalent CG, because there's
Yeah.
more grass in some scenes. It kept raining almost half of the times that they were outside. So they had to CG the sky because they were filming out in the rain. And then they had to CG the ground because it looked
Hmm.
wet, stuff like that. Very interesting stuff. High recommendation of that. Stowaway to Nowhere. That one's really, really, really good as well. Metal Beast and Holy Motors, that lets you know about the failure of technology, the computers, electricity, and why everything is so mechanical. It even shows you, maybe I'm pointing out something that maybe you did or didn't notice, but there's a part where one of the people working on bikes has a mirror they're looking in, but it's not an actual mirror. They're
Well,
old
it's all
broken
iPhones.
phones. Yeah, so you
Yeah.
notice that?
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I
yeah.
love
I
that.
didn't realize that at first, and I was just like, "Holy shit, how fucking cool!"
Yeah.
So then they have Darkest Angel, Anna Taylor-Joy as Furiosa, which again, you can tell that this whole cast really gave it their all and really cared. Even these people, like we had just said, we consider it one of the best action movies of the last decade and stuff, of the decade that it came out. These people feel the same way. They feel like they have like immense weight on their shoulders to bring something up to that standard. These people are all on board. Motorbike Messiah, Chris Hemsworth as Dementis, which I said I believe in my review of it. I believe Dementis is one of the best on-screen villains in a sci-fi movie like this. I
Yeah.
think we've gotten two great sand movies with two absolutely amazing villains in them this year.
I agree.
That'll go down in sci-fi history for the foreseeable future. So all of those special features, I'm going to give my rankings. Well, I know you didn't watch all of them, but I'm sure you won't be far behind. And I almost never, if you watch my reviews on here, I almost never give tens for special features because I always say the same thing. I can never have enough. It doesn't matter if you gave
Mm.
me 30 of them, I can never have enough. So I usually give
Yeah.
it a 9. But I am so happy with the sheer volume. And it's not those cut and paste special features where it's like, yeah, my name is Chris Hemsworth and I'm Dementis, and then just a bunch of shots from the movie that don't tell
Yeah.
me anything. It's
And
just
then
a
him kind of
glorified trailer.
talking over it like
Yeah,
bleakly
like
and then or
yeah,
briefly, and they just have a bunch of footage that you've kind of seen before, like B-roll stuff,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they don't do any of that. It's very on the point. They know what you want to see. They know you want to see more of this world. They give it to you. 10 out of
Right.
10 on those special features. On the audio, I'm going to give it a 10. I didn't notice a single flaw. And as I always like to say whenever I do my reviews, I am not that critical of a person. So if I noticed, or if I didn't notice a flaw that you noticed and you did, sound off down below, but I'm not that critical. I was just there to
Yeah.
embrace it and have fun with the audio. And with what I could hear, there was nothing wrong with it. Will, how'd you feel? What's your scoring on that?
I didn't watch all the special features, but I mean that first one alone, as I said, I got about a half hour in. And
Yeah,
just being a fan of this franchise, I grew up with the Mad Max movies. My dad
yeah,
used to watch them all the time, so Mel Gibson was a common staple in my house. Not just the Mad Max films, his other movies
yeah,
as well, but Mad Max in particular. I always gravitated towards. The Road Warrior was like one of my favorite movies. So I'm a big supporter uh, of these films. I just think that featurette itself is enough to, if you're a fan of the Mad Max movies, it's enough to buy this release.
yep. Agreed. It's a whole
It
hour alone.
goes a whole hour. It goes very in depth. You got interviews not only with the cast, you got interviews with like the assistant director, you got
Yeah,
interviews with the script writer. Like they're all involved with this. And it really just goes to show like how hard they worked on this. Like you said, they got interviews with everybody. They go behind the scenes in depth as to why the world is set up the way it was. Like you were saying, it rained a lot during the filming of this movie. They shot a lot of this movie in and around Sydney,
yeah,
um, as opposed to being out in the desert. Fury Road was much more like almost like guerrilla style in the aspect that they were just out there, in the actual desert with all the
yep,
elements. And they did that for parts of this movie as well, but a lot of it was shot around Sydney. So yeah, they explain that whole thing with why there's more CGI. But yeah, man, I'm probably going to give it a 4.5 out of 5 right now. I haven't seen all the special features, but if that's anything to
yeah,
go by from what I've seen so far, it's the most, or I should say, one of the most engaging, behind the scenes
yeah,
or making ofs that I've seen in a long time. So, I got to give it credit for a mainstream release. With some of these studio releases, you and I have talked about it before. We don't always get the meat on the bone, so to speak, when it comes to
yep,
some of the special features. Sometimes a lot of these major releases, even though they're big budget movies that a lot of people are waiting for, they don't always give you a lot of special features. So I appreciate the fact that we have at least an hour long featurette of like a making of that. So that's
yep,
cool. And George Miller is a mastermind. He's a genius, and it's interesting to kind of get like a look into his process, especially because this is a world that he's pretty much made a career from for the last, 40, 50 years. So, Mad Max is his baby, and it's great to get any more insight that we can get into that world and into his head. So, and I think that feature in itself, does that. So,
yep.
it's a win for me.
Absolutely. What are you scoring the whole package as a whole?
4.5 out of 5. Yeah. Do we want to
Okay,
talk about the art real quick? This is
go
the
ahead.
I got
Yeah,
this from Amazon. I don't know if you said there's an exclusive out there from what is it, Zavi, I believe,
I
in the
believe it's
UK.
Zavi and Fanac. You can get one where she's kind of mounted on a throne of wheels
Hmm.
and gears and
Yeah.
looking like a harbinger of death. But yeah, that's a nice little beauty shot of that.
I love the back too, the war boys on the car there. That's
Yeah, it looks
cool.
so
I don't
cool.
know how well you can see that.
Yeah, that came through pretty clean.
So, yeah, here's the discs for everybody that hasn't seen those. You got your
I really
4K
like
disc
that
and your
internal.
Blu-ray disc. Yeah, I kind of like that shot in the background. It's got the Mentis there with the that other character's cool too. I forget his name. The guy on the bike there with the horns.
Oh
That guy
yeah.
was pretty cool. It's a cool little character.
Yeah.
So that's the inside. You just get your scene there when they're riding through the wasteland. But yeah, man, I'm a fan of this steelbook. I think it's cool, And again, it'd be cool to see if they do like another collection down the line with these movies now that this one's out. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, man, that's it. That's pretty much my thoughts. Like I said, 4.5 out of 5 for sure. Very happy with the release. Killer
Yeah.
visuals, killer audio, really good behind the scenes featurette. So I dig
Yeah.
it.
That's well said. I'm gonna wrap mine up with a perfect score. I think it's my first perfect score of the year so far. I don't think I did a Dune review. That
Mm,
one's definitely up there, especially with its features, special features. But for a studio release, I'll retract that. I think I've given tens for boutiques out there. But
okay.
for this movie right here as a studio release, I couldn't. The only thing I'd expect to get more from is if a boutique picks this up in 5 years from now. That's the only way I can expect to get more than what we got today. And
Yeah.
so with that, that's all I really have to say, and I'm super happy with it. Will, do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, thanks again for watching, guys. If you like this video and the other videos we have on the channel, check out our other content. Comment down below. Let us know what you guys think. Did you guys pick this up? What do you think about the visuals? What do you think about the audio? Does it live up to your expectations? Let us know in the comments. We appreciate your feedback. And as always, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. You guys know what to do. Talk to you guys soon.
Later, everybody.